to start again by thanking you all for coming, thanking Shams for permission for all of us to come together and investigate his life and teachings, and to give gratitudes to the members of Turkat, and in particular Jamal Nur, for gathering all of us together. The centrality of the relationship between a spiritual mentor, a peer or a sheikh, and a spiritual seeker, a murid, is one of the cornerstones of the Sufi path in Islam. This relationship, which goes back to the very example of the relationship between the Prophet, Hazrat Peygamber, and Imam Ali, is typically described as a vertical relationship which includes aspects of submitting one's will not just to God, but in a meaningful way to the Shaykh as well. Yet there are few relationships in the history of Sufism that complicate this picture of a vertical relationship by moving towards a horizontal model of complementarity, of transformative love, and ultimately of a mirror-to-mirror mutual reflection. What happens in these relationships is exactly what happens when two mirrors are placed in front of one another. Whatever is placed in between these two mirrors witnesses a reflection all the way out to infinity. And so it has been with Mawlana and Shams. Each is a mirror for the other, and yet there is something transformative, redemptive, and even alchemical when their pure hearts come to share in this fellowship, friendship, and companionship, sohbat. And they come face to face in this mirroring relationship that extends all the way to God's infinity. This is what Mawlana says: شمس الحق تبریزی در آینه صافت گر غیر خدا بینم باشم بدتر از کافر. O Shams al-Haq of Tabriz, if I see anything other than God in your pure mirror, I am worse than an infidel. In this paper, I will touch on three reflections: the reflection of Shams in Mawlana's writings, the reflection of Mawlana in Shams's writing, and then take a step back to reflect on the ongoing mutual reflection and transformation after the earthly disappearance of Shams. I will end by pointing out that it's this lingering transformation that has a great lesson for all of us today and every day who aspire to their own Shams and Mawlana encounter onto infinity. So the first part is about Mawlana on Shams in the Masnavi. For good reason, the most common attempts to locate Shams in Mawlana's writings have focused on the Divan-i-Kabir or the Divan-i-Shams. Even the name Divan-i-Shams demonstrates that Mawlana refuses to take authorship for the Divan, instead hiding his own identity in Shams's pen name. This was a remarkable feat for pre-modern poets who used their poetic pen names, typically mentioned in the last lines of their ghazals, to stamp something like a trademark on the poems. In this case, Mawlana refers not to his own name, but rather to Shams's, an act of spiritual humility and an acknowledgement of Shams's impact on Mawlana's transformation. Every page of the Divan-i-Kabir offers a glimpse into Mawlana's transformation at having met Shams. Pir man o murad man, dard man o davay man, fash beguftam in sukhan, Shams man o khuday man, az to be haq raside am, ey haq guzar man, shukr to ra sitade am, Shams man o khuday man. My pir, my desired one, you are my ailment, you my cure. I'll say it openly: you are my Shams, you are my Lord. It's through you that I have reached God. Or Shamsul Haq ast razam, Tabriz shod niyazam, او قبله namazam, او nur ab dastam. Shamsul Haq is my secret, Raz, my needfulness is through Tabriz, Niyaz. He is the qibla of my prayer, namaz. We could go on almost indefinitely here, but I wish to turn to a lesser explored aspect, the impact of Shams on the Masnaviye Ma'navi. Rather than a futile and perhaps too rigid of an attempt to present the totality of Rumi's teachings, let's begin at the beginning with the story of the name. In the brilliant opening 18 lines, Mevlana uses the symbol of the name to represent the essential human condition. He invites us to listen attentively to the lament of the name that has been cut from the bed of reeds, which was its original home. We too have been separated from our divine origin, as in, we come from God, and towards God we're always returning. The reed's exile from its origin is painful, and it suffers from the pain of firaq, separation. But it's precisely through the anguish of separation that the reed has been transformed, as Mevlana has been transformed, into a reed flute, which now produces beauty. It is this fire of love, this ishq, that burns away all impurities, even as it transforms the kham, the raw, to the cooked, to the spiritually mature. Before moving on to the first full narrative, the story of the king and the maiden, Mevlana reminds us that the tales being told are in fact the reality of our own condition. In other words, these stories are not about characters outside of our being, but rather they correspond to our own spiritual faculties and tendencies. In this tale, the maiden suffers from an ailment that no physician has been able to diagnose, except for a wise soul who's able to identify this affliction as extreme love. Illat ashiq z illat ha judast. Ishq as surlab asrar khudast. The affliction of love is apart from all other afflictions. Love is the astrolabe of divine secrets. Mevlana, ever the master of 1,000 lines of poetry, using every conceivable image to speak about love, here confesses that love transcends mere human words. Harche guyam ishq ra sharh o bayan, chun be ishq ayam khajal bashan az an. Whatever I say to explain love and to make it clear, I'm ashamed of those words. At this point in the narrative, and after this mention of ishq, extreme love, something magical happens. There's a remarkable narrative breakdown. The knave is gone, the king is gone, the maiden is gone, the narrative is gone. In expressing that the intellect alone cannot elucidate the inner mysteries of ishq, Mevlana uses the term aftab, or sun, which is of course reminiscent of his spiritual mentor Shams, whose name also means sun. Aftab amad dalil aftab, ger dalilat bayad az vei ru matab. Sunshine reveals its true nature in each ray. So if it's proof you want, just look this way. از وی ارسای نشانی می‌دهد، شمس هر دم نور جانی می‌دهد. Shadows can indicate what's shining bright, but it is the sun which fills your soul with light. So now Mevlana has spoken of Shams, and we go from talking about sun to talking about the son of faith, Shamsuddin. From here the intensity picks up, as do the frequency of the mention of Shams's name. With each mention, the fervor in the narrative intensifies until reaching a zenith. خود غریبی در جهان چون شمس نیست، شمس جان باقی کش امس نیست، شمس در خارج اگر هست فرد میتوان هم مثل او تصویر کرد. The eternal sun, there's nothing quite so strange. Their soul sun has no past, it doesn't change. There's only one sun there before your eyes, but similar suns you can still visualize. چون حدیث روی شمس الدین رسید شمس چهارم آسمان سر در کشید شرح این هجران و این خون جگر این زمان بگذار تا وقت دگر. When news about my Shams-ed-Din first came, the heaven's highest sun withdrew through shame. Describing separation's torture then is best postponed till we speak again. Mevlana''s disciple, Osam-ed-Din, pushes him to speak more about Shams, which Mevlana refuses. فتنه و آشوب و خونریزی مجوی بیش از این از شمس تبریزی مگوی. Seek no more discord and shedding of my blood. Say no more of Shams of Tabriz. Osam offers a comeback and says the Sufi must be an ibn al-Waqt, a child of the now, a child of the present moment. Mevlana concedes, but under the caveat that it is better to speak of the secrets of one's beloved through the tales of others. گفتمش پوشیده خوشتر سر یار خود تو در ضمن حکایت گوش دار خوشتران باشد که سر دلبران گفته آید در حدیث دیگران. The loved one's secret best kept veiled, I said. Listen to it in ecstasy instead. The lover's secret that has been kept concealed is best through the tales of other loves revealed. Mevlana now returns to the narrative by stating that from this point on, his own story with Shams, would be told through the stories of others. The Masnavi can thus be read now as a now direct, now indirect attempt to talk about separation and union from both the divine source and the human beloveds like Shams, who have provided a mirror-like presence for the divine. Let's take a look at this only through the lens of the first daftar, the first volume of the Masnavi. What is the overall narrative arch of the first volume? We begin with the story of the Ney, and we end with the story of Imam Ali. We begin with the present state of humanity, because the Prophet reminded us, speak to people at the level of their understanding. And our understanding, our maqam right now is brokenness, of being cut off and separated from God, or at least experiencing it that. And we end with the story of Imam Ali, of the perfect human being, the one who is like a mountain, cool, and not like a piece of straw, kah, to be blown hither and thither by the winds of one's passion, by the story of Ali who puts his sword back when the enemy spits on his blessed face. This is the progression not just of the Masnavi, but also of the human spirit cooked in the fires of divine love. This is the hidden story of the fragrance of Shams, illuminating the story of the Masnavi while being told through the tales of others. خوشتران باشد که سر دلبران گفته آید در حدیث دیگران. In the encounter with our own Shams, we too can aspire to move from being spiritually raw and crying out in the agony of separation to being cooked and reaching, inshallah, the maqam of Ali. We too are to aspire to be enlightened by the sun. Now the second part is about Mevlana in Shams's writing, in Shams's Mahalat. Not surprisingly, Shams also reflects on his meeting with Mevlana and what Mevlana means to him. Our best source for this is again the Mahalat. Shams indicates that he had been inclined to meet Mevlana from the very beginning, but Mevlana was not yet prepared for receiving his secret. He goes on to say that his task was to rescue Mevlana, whom he calls that sweetheart servant of God, from the unworthy folks around him that he feared would cause Mevlana harm. As we mentioned before lunch, his first encounter with Mevlana probably took place 15 or 16 years before the famous meeting. From Shams, we get intriguing insights into Mevlana''s life before the encounter with Shams, including that Mevlana had been like a pharaoh filled with pride over his knowledge, and that he took pride in his command of fiqh, of the usul of fiqh, and the rulings of law. From Shams's perspective, these bodies of knowledge do not belong to the way of God and the way of the prophets, and can actually veil the path. Fiqh pushanande rah ast. He recognized that Mevlana was in a model of pir and murid, sheikh and disciple relationship, whereas he wanted something more for Mevlana. He wanted something more from Mevlana. He says, I wanted a path beyond being a pir and a murid. Rahi baraye piri o muridi ast. What was this path? The path of theophanic encounter, of mirroring. Shams, known for his eccentric mannerisms and temperament, also strove for a unique relationship when he says, the one who finds a way to companionship with me bears a sign. That sign is that the companionship of others loses all appeal for him. It loses its flavor. It actually becomes impossible for him to have sohbat, friendship, companionship with them. One aspect of this has been that Shams prevented Mevlana from studying the works of previous Sufi masters, even Mevlana's own father. He asks Mevlana to not read or quote from Sultan al-Ulama, Baha'u'llah's book, the Ma'arif. Aflaki states that Mevlana obliged Shams as long as Shams was alive. It's well known that Mevlana's disciples did not take well to this move away from the established tradition, and many were jealous of the intensity of the time that Mevlana and Shams spent together. As difficult as it is to hear this, it is entirely possible that Mevlana's own son might have had a hand in Shams's murder. Equally telling is the statement of Sultan Balad, who compares Shams's effect on Mevlana to nothing less than sorcery. Who is this man who has carried our sheikh away from us like a piece of straw being carried away on a stream? He has veiled him from the whole of humanity. There's no sign of his soul anymore. We no longer see his face. Is Shams a magician? Otherwise, what magic, what incantation did he use to ensnare our sheikh? We have always heard about how Mevlana was transformed through meeting Shams. True enough. However, we have not sufficiently focused on how Shams was also transformed through meeting Mevlana. Sufis often talk about the need to rise above connection to union and separation. Earlier Sufis of the path of love, Mazhab Ishq, taught that so long as one yearns for union with the beloved, then one is in love with union and not with the beloved. Shams seems to have reached this higher maqam. Separation from Mevlana brings me no pain. Union with him brings me no joy. The best indication of this is to think about the way that Shams speaks about Mevlana after their sohbat. Shams here uses the metaphor of mirroring. He says, this Mevlana is like moonlight. Sights cannot behold the sunlight of my being unless it is reflected through the moon. Sights cannot bear the radiance and luminosity of sunlight. The moon cannot reach the sun unless the sun reaches the moon. In another place, he indicates the reciprocal nature of the relationship by saying, the sun's face is turned towards Mevlana because Mevlana's face is turned towards Shams. There's a beautiful step that happens in many mentoring relationships when the mentor gives up on the idol of transforming the murid from that which they have come to imagine for them and sees them for who they are and who they are intended to be. Shams reaches the point where he sees the final worth of Mevlana, which he praises in the lofty statement of, and I quote, "Even the prophets are in sad anguish, yearning to be in his presence." He says, "Whoever wishes to see the Peygamber, God's messenger, should see Mevlana. How blessed is the one who has found him." The third section is about Suhbat after Shams. Where does one go in life after Shams is gone? Where do we look after that heart-transforming, ravishing beloved comes and goes? How do we feel the presence of God after the ones through whom we most directly felt the presence of God are gone? The story of Shams and Mevlana does not end with Shams. Because after Shams, there's not just Jalal, but there's now Hazrat Mevlana, who has found God inside and all around. This Mevlana is not raw, not cooked, but on fire. Suhbat also does not end with Shams. There would be other friendships, other loves, other mirrors. So there's Salahuddin Zaku, and there's Chalabi Husamuddin. What do we hear in Aflaki's Manaqib al-Arifin? When Mevlana finished searching for Shamsuddin Tabrizi and came to witness the latter's secrets within himself, he led forth Sheikh Salahuddin. Listen to it again. When he finished searching for Shamsuddin, when he's done with finding Shams outside, he came to find Shams's secrets within himself. And it's the secret of Shams that we continue reciting in the Mevlevi ritual. Baraye dam Hazrat Mevlana, sirr Shams Tabrizi, karam Imam Ali, hu begu. The identity of the relationship that Mevlana had found, the gift of Suhbat, is something that Aflaki attests to explicitly. He states, Mevlana found the same friendship that Shams had with God in the outward form of Sheikh Salahuddin. Therefore, the same love and the same favor that he had shown Shams, now he showed Salahuddin. Before Shams, there's Jalaluddin Muhammad Balkhi, the erudite scholar, even familiar with Tasawwuf through the teachings of his father and Burhanuddin. After Shams, there's Hazrat Mevlana. The difference is not just Shams. The difference is the encounter. It is the encounter of Shams and Mevlana that offers the transformation, the redemption, the cooking. It's the meeting that offers us this cooking, the oven, the movement from gel to gul, from clay to rose, from bashar to insan, from a mere creature to the fully realized human being. May those of us who aspire to be enlightened by the sun continue to heed this lesson of knowing that the teachers are catalysts, not permanent icons. That the purpose of the ayat, the signs, and if you remember in the Quran, the signs are to be found in scripture, in nature, وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, inside the souls of humanity. So some people can also be the signs of God. That the purpose of the ayat of God is to indeed to point. As our Zen friends remind us, the finger is there to point the full moon, and we're not to stay stuck looking at the finger. Here's a story from Mevlana. One day Mevlana was sitting in the garden of Husamuddin Chalabi. He had his feet in the water and he was narrating many stories of praise about Shamsuddin. Badruddin, who was one of the great disciples, sighs. Oh. And he said, alas, what a shame. Mevlana says, why alas? What alas? What reason is there for alas? What place does alas have in our gathering? Badruddin was embarrassed. He puts his head down and he said, I felt regretful since I never got to meet Hazrat Mawlana Shamsuddin, and I never got to benefit from his luminous presence. Mawlana was quiet for a long time and didn't speak a word. Afterwards he said, even though you never met Shams Tabrizi, may God exalt his mention, I swear by the sanctified soul of my father that you have arrived at the presence of one in whose every strand of hair there are 100,000 Shams Tabrizis. And even Shams would be bewildered in comprehending the secrets of my innermost secrets. Mawlana's disciples became joyous and rose up in Sama. Let me end with one observation, which is not in the Turkish. Shams at one point says that so long as we are speaking about the great Anbiya and the great Awliya as if they are dead, we're just gossiping. It is as if we're talking behind dead people's backs. But that these ones, in a real sense, are presences that continue to be with us. In that sense, one of the things that I ask us to reflect on in my last minute is the idea that we speak about sohbet all the time, the talks and the teachings of masters. But sohbet is actually connected to that idea of being a sahaba, of a companion of the Prophet. These come from the same root. That to have a taste of the sweetness of sohbat is to have had a sense of what it would have been like to sit in the presence of the Prophet. And both Mawlana and Shams talk about this. Aflaki calls Mawlana Farzand Jan Muhammad, the child of Muhammad's soul, and Mawlana calls Shams Nur Mustafa, the light of Muhammad. When Mawlana talks about Shams, he says, As Shamsul Haq bihaq rasidam. I went from Shamsul Haq to Haq. I went from Shams to God. And there's that lovely story about Syrianus, the Greek disciple of Mawlana, who got himself into a lot of trouble by calling Mawlana Khudasaz, God maker. So the more conservative types were going to call a trial and take him before a judge and say, you're a heretic, because we all know that God is without beginning, without end. How can Mawlana be God maker? And he says, no, my language is not very good, you don't understand. When I call Mawlana God maker, I mean to say that Mawlana makes God real to me. He makes God real for me. Before Mawlana, God was a word. God was an idea. Now, he is real. So as many times as we talk about Hazrat Mawlana, Hazrat Shams Tabrizi, may we also realize that their gift to us is huzur, presence, divine presence that has transformed their own lives, and may we be also able to, inshallah, find this transformation inside ourselves. Çok teşekkür ederim. Aşk olsun.